Alto, and these are going to be some belated favorite lists for books, movies, music. This one is for my favorite albums of 2023. I'm going to start with some honorable mentions. First being Come With Fierce Grace by Alabaster de Plume. Really liked it as an album. The problem was I feel like it's a little front-loaded, so whenever I go to listen to it, it's not like a front-to-back listen. It's just kind of like get the highlights and get out. So I felt kind of bad about putting it in like an album list, but still really like the first half especially. And another album I wanted to shout out is Number One Spirit by an artist called Silicon Valley. I think they're just underrated. I was put on earlier this year. They have like 1,000 monthly listeners, and I think they're pretty cool. If you're like Gen Z into like the hyperpop, like Blade / Frost Children aesthetic of sound, definitely check them out. Yeah, a lot of their songs are still stuck in my head. So without further ado, number 10 is going to be Tumor, Hot Between Worlds. Really like this, and it makes a lot of sense as like a very linear progression based on like their other works, especially the EP. I forget what it's called, but it has Jackie on it. Anyways, kind of like a more like palatable / pop-y sound. Not in a bad way, but just compared to some like the other, I guess more like ambient stuff going on, this is more like blown out, distorted, fuzzy, like super rhythmic. There's a bunch of like fills and pockets throughout where like it's so easy to like just nod your head along to almost any song in this. The one thing I think detracts from it is like just track order. It's not super consistent, like sound wise. It'll go in a bunch of different directions in the first half. I think the second half is way more like airtight and things kind of flow more naturally, but initially it just doesn't super work as like an album. Although the songs individually super catchy, really like them. There's a lot of like just instrumentally the most interesting stuff that they've put out to me. Yeah, just production wise, thought it was super good. The song Purified by the Fire was chef's kiss. Number 9 is going to be How Do You Sleep at Night by Teo Touchdown. Just a super interesting and like unabashed musical artist coming out right now. They have featured a lot on like some rap songs, but I wouldn't call like this like a rap album. I think there's like equal influence to something like Outkast or Susie and the Banshees. There's like a ton of like goth rock influence on this for sure. Just really cool, very like storytelling oriented album. There's like rapping, there's singing. It's super tongue-in-cheek and fun, and I just really liked it more than I thought it would. Continually coming back to it, super catchy, like a lot of earworms. I think this is like a very natural progression for the oversaturation of hip-hop, leading to people just like pushing boundaries until we get here where it's like so tangential and disconnected that it's like barely still rap, but yeah, really cool music. Number 8 is going to be This Stupid World by Yola Tangle. I only found this like in the latter half of the year. Completely went under my radar, and I'm glad I found it because it's super good. I would say it's like very instrumental forward, and it's also super abrasive and kind of like thrashy. It's not going to be like the sort of like whirlwindy like poppy stuff like some other like very like revered singles, but this is something that I was just looking for. I watched a movie recently called Sounds of Science, which, before I like start rambling, basically they just did like a soundtrack for a movie that was all instrumental, and I really enjoyed it. And so from there I was kind of like looking for more instrumental music by them. So this album just kind of like fell into my lap at a perfect time. Really like it. Not sure what to say. It's kind of like droney, shoegazy rock, but elevated times a million, 100 billion. It's really good. I feel like they're a very like revered band, so you know, if you're not hip to them, check them out. And number 6, I'm going to give it to this, technically the Jockstrap remix album that came out this year, which is one of like the biggest 180s I had listening wise, where initially when it came out listened once and I was super underwhelmed. There were like 2 songs I liked, and then I was like, just really not into the rest of this. But I gave it a couple revisits, and at this point, I'm like fully on board. I think it is a really interesting remix album in like a literal sense, where there's so little that's consistent between the original song and the remixed version, but like the skeleton of it, like the backbone, is still there, and it's super interesting to think of like how far it can be taken and like switched, and like what blank chord or like sound or sample does within like an entirely different context. It also is like super engaging in terms of there's so many beat switches and like splices and like pitch shifts and just so many like effects and directions it goes within each song, and every song is like just as jam-packed and wild and like crazy. And yeah, really interesting. I think initially I was just kind of like sensory overloaded and put off by the fact that it was so different from what I recognized, but at this point I've listened to it probably like 20 plus times, and I like every song. They're so good. It's, yeah, super interesting. At number 6, I have Sun Arcs by Blue Lake, an instrumental album that I didn't know about initially. I was looking towards the end of the year for like something that might have slipped me by, saw this, listened to it, and as a whole, I didn't super enjoy it, but I ended up putting it in a playlist that I would like shuffle through. And every time a song came on, I would be like, oh, I like this song, you know, what's it called? And it would be from this album. So individually, every song I feel like is so high quality that listening to it all together kind of makes you appreciate it a bit less. I think like as like a finished product, it can be like a little dense. And so taking it in like smaller bites just made it a lot more palatable. And at this point, I've like individually enjoyed every song. So listening to it all together, I'm able to kind of recognize the pieces that I like as they come and go. The entire thing is instrumental. It's like very kind of like twinkling Americana-esque. Like there's a lot of guitar, acoustic guitar going on. But yeah, it's I wouldn't say ambient. Not sure, kind of like soundscapey. Really like it though. It's a band that I didn't know at all, and I've gotten a lot of money's worth listening to it. Okay, so now in the top 5, starting with Space Heavy by King Cruel. It's kind of like a sleeper hit. Not that it was like a surprise to me that I would like it. King Cruel being like one of my favorite artists since like middle school, like growing up listening to his music. You know, I expected to like this, but I didn't expect to keep liking it. Like the ceiling kept raising on how much I could enjoy the album. Every time I went back, I feel like I was able to gain something new, or like just appreciate a song that initially like I would have skipped or just wasn't super crazy about. I think this album has like very obvious highlights, whether it's like the Ravina song or like If Only It Was Warmth. There's just a lot of like, you know, more like bombastic stuff that the sort of like interlude or instrumental tracks were kind of easier to ignore. And now the more I've gone back to it, they've become some of my favorites. Like I think Flimsy is so good, or I think it's called like Wednesday Overcast. Anyways, just an album that I've been able to come back to very repeatedly, and it feels like an amalgam of the best parts of every album before this. Like Man Alive, there's a lot of like underclass elements to it. There's a ton of like 6 Feet Beneath the Moon, or like the Ooze, like little aspects of a sound that have evolved over time. And this feels like a best of compilation in some ways. Yeah, just really into it, period. At number 4, maybe the fastest I've grown to like an album. Like it just was exponential. I only found it like 2-ish months ago, and I'm still currently obsessed with it. It is James Blake's new album, Playing Robots into Heaven. It is a sort of return to form to like his electronic roots, and it feels like the perfect kind of amalgam of the initial like early stuff and this period he was in like 2019 to 2020, when he was releasing the singles If a Car Beside You Moves Ahead, that little like EP of like I Keep Calling, or I think it's called like Before or something, or when he released It's Too Precious. Anyways, the sort of like very intricate like tightly produced and like super textured electronic music that is still like vocal forward. This album definitely leans like more into like this sort of like clubby house sound, but the samples used are so catchy, and yeah, there's just like a great rhythm. So many different songs are like insane highlights. It's just super good, and like as an album, I love how it ends on such like a mellow and like intimate note. The last two songs, like very ambient and like intimate and like acoustic. Yeah, super good, great album. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's super good. Number 3 is gonna be the new Mary Lattimore album, Goodbye Hotel Arcada. Got to see her in concert as well. I saw a lot of these artists in concert. I saw Jockstrap, saw King Cruel, saw Mary Lattimore. Anyways, more to come, I guess. But this album, Goodbye Hotel Arcada, is this like super intricate harp album that is super atmospheric. And until I saw her live, I didn't realize like the major aspect of this is like how looping and hypnotic it is because it's like recorded through loops, like through repeat, and like add another layer and add another layer and add another layer of her like knocking on the harp, or just like these really intricate like runs between notes, super twinkling. But there's also like this like whirling like hypnotic bass line, or like just kind of like lower register that is like so emphasis on hypnotic. It's like the word for this album. Yeah, super liked it if you're into ambient music. It's also just like harp music in general, which I have a soft spot for. Another one of my favorite artists being Joanna Newsom. Obviously I love Mary Lattimore. Stuff like Alice Coltrane or like Amanda Wittig, Dorothy Ashby. Anyways, just a super good album. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Number 2 is gonna be Picture of Bunny Rabbit by Arthur Russell. This was my year of Arthur Russell listening, like all of his backlogs, watching like the Wild Combination documentary, just getting really obsessed with him as a person. I think such like a singular artist, and every direction he went into, he did so well. And yeah, whether it was like Another Thought, Calling Out of Context, or my favorite album being World of Echo. This album is kind of just like unreleased stuff from the World of Echo era. Love it so much. Not sure how to describe it. Again, kind of hypnotic and like sprawling, although these are mostly instrumental tracks. The length of them sometimes gets up to like 7 minutes, I think, but there's just really like no one like him at all. His sound was super interesting. There's a lot of cello. He was a cellist, and yeah, he transforms. It's like very soundscapey. Just a great album. Yeah, love it. And my number 1 album of 2023 was Songs Before Bed by Otto Benson. This was a collection of instrumentals that he would make. The kind of backstory or idea of them is that he would, get to the end of the day and then try to convey how his day was through a song before going to bed. And it is completely instrumental. There's no vocals at all, and it's still super evocative and textured, and it's super impulsive in the sense that there's very little filter between thought and like it's like very like improvisational, basically, where it's just like unfiltered feelings and like ideas and like, what if this, go for it, whatever. There's still a ton of melody. It's not like, super avant jazz or anything, but it's like pared back, it's simplistic. It's just super good. Again, to kind of like highlight my Spotify Wrapped was my top song of the year. This is just like a super easy album to listen to, and it's also, because it's instrumental, it's like a very blank slate, very easy to have on in the background and just make very lasting memories. Yeah, it's great. The entire album is kind of like about remembering a day, and I have since made memories to like every song on here. So every time I listen, it just like compounds on how much I like it. Yeah, one of my favorite artists, with Clam Day being one of my favorite albums. He's just super interesting. As an artist, I can tell like how much overlap there is. We're like a similar age, and so I feel like we grew up I'm saying this as if like I know him or like we're friends. We're not, but just through music, I feel like I've been able to learn a lot about like his influences and his sounds. Just because on Clam Day specifically, it's like a patchwork of so many different genres, and they're all things that I'm like very into. Whether it's like the ambient, like the glitchcore, the sort of like abrasive, blown out, like breakbeat adjacent stuff. It's just like the perfect album in terms of like super singular to that person and me just having a lot of musical influences in common. Yeah, I just was super like amazed finding that and like listening to something that resonated with me so much. And again, with this album, I think it's just more of the same, where obviously, you know, from the albums I picked, I'm very into like instrumental like ambient music, and so this instrumental album by him, liked it a lot. Spoiler for next year, well, this album, Songs Before Bed, came out on New Year's, and hence why it's in, you know, the 2023 list. And he released another album this New Year's, which is like all like abrasive electronic music. You know, I'm already listening to that a lot, so just a heads up for next year. But that was my favorite albums of 2023. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna do another list for movies, for books, and then you'll know what I liked this year or last year. Anyways, thanks for watching. Bye.